Hey everybody, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and today I'm doing a review of Dragons of Etchinstone, the solo Palm game from Chip Theory, as well as discussing its expansions. And disclaimer that I got a review copy of this one. And if you like the content on the One Stop Co-op Shop, consider supporting us through Patreon. You get early access to our videos and exclusive videos every month you can't see anywhere else. You can also listen to our weekly podcast for reviews and design discussions, or join the conversation and say hi on our Discord. So as I said, Dragons of Etchinstone is a Palm-style game, which means you are holding all the components for the game in your two hands. And how it works is you're progressing through more and more challenging regions, 4 in all, using your hand of 4 cards to battle the elements and the monsters. And if you survive through the 4 regions, you get to face one of the 4 dragons, and if you can beat them and survive their counterattack, you win the game. So let's discuss 5 key things to know about Dragons of Etchinstone. So first, my number 5, the least important to know, but still worth mentioning, or I wouldn't say it, is the palm nature of the game itself. So you have generally your hand of cards in one hand, and then you have the entire rest of the deck in the other. Your deck is in between the region card and the other region and the dragons, and you offset it slightly to see what you're facing currently. So here I'm facing the 3rd location. And then as you use your cards, they go to the back, but they're separated away by the dragon and the region, so you're not going to accidentally go through your deck again. But it works pretty smoothly to hold 4 cards over here and 1 thing over here. I have played this in bed. I played it at a tournament I was helping to run yesterday. I will note, though, with the Siege expansion, it gets quite a bit harder to handle. And then also when you're fighting the bosses, you're holding 7 or 8 cards in your hand at a time, and that can really get quite a bit more difficult to do in your hand, so it's not always feasible or useful the way they designed the game to work. Speaking of that final battle, that's my number 4 point. This is also a mix for my taste. And these are pretty epic battles because in regular battles, you usually have just 4 cards and you're making 1 set of cards to face off against what's challenging you. In the dragon battles, you have 7 or more cards and you're making 2 different sets. The dragons also give you a bit of strategy in what you want to level up because certain elements are going to be more or less useful against them, so it does change the game a bit. But on the negative side, you basically get half of your hand to deal with the dragon's movement challenge, and then the other half of your hand to deal with their damage challenge. And there's a ton of swinginess in how well this goes for you, because if you get all your combat cards in the movement section, or all your movement cards in the combat section, that clearly doesn't help you out very much. Now, the game does let you get rid of 1 card and then put the rest at the back and draw your other cards, but usually it's not going to be so either or. You'll have some of your best cards in one of the hands and some of your best cards in the other, and sometimes luck will be on your side and sometimes it won't. And that goes into my only full con for the game, my number 3, which is the swinginess and randomness, because you will get cards that work well together and you won't. The cards can combo together with colors, like if you have a red to go with this one, you get a higher value. Sometimes you'll be going against an enemy, but you'll draw all movement cards. Sometimes you'll be going against a location and draw all enemy cards. You can, kind of like with the bosses, divert, where you get rid of 1 card and then face off against something new, but you might get the exact same type of thing again, so it still might not work in your favor. And the big negative here is that things will snowball, because if you're not doing well, you'll take damage and weaken your cards, and then you also won't be getting experience to level up your cards. So as you get to the tougher and tougher regions, and especially when you get to the dragon, there's going to be no way for you to win. So I've often had games where I just called it early because it was obvious I was not going to be successful. But my number 2 is a full-on pro, a really cool system for the game, and that is the way leveling and damage is handled. So as you defeat enemies and locations, you'll get experience to spend, and that can be used to level up your cards from whatever their current level is, in this case 2, over to 3, or all the way up to 4. Similarly, when you take damage, you are canceling it with the shields, but that rotates the cards down to weaker versions. You can even remove them from your deck entirely, which is going to make you rush through the regions and not be able to level as much. And just the general feel of seeing your deck, when you're doing well, become insanely powerful, and having a bunch of level 3s and 4s at the end is inherently fun and enjoyable. And finally, getting to my number 1 point, the most important to know for the game, and this one is also a full-on pro, and that's the actual card play in the game. Putting aside the swinginess, because again, sometimes you just won't have what you need for a given challenge. But each of the cards you draw can be used in a lot of different ways. One of them is used as your main spell, determining the main statistics you're getting. One of them is the element, whose color is going to potentially boost your main action, but which also gives you initiative when you're doing a combat. But then you get to use a 3rd card as a boost, whose value is going to either give you more movement or attack, or give you better initiative. And then your fourth card becomes a reserve card, which might not seem that important, but this is the card you're carrying forward to whatever your next challenge is. And often that's the one that I try to level up the most so that I'm boosted the next time I fight or adventure. And although the core mechanics are pretty similar, fights are pretty different from adventures in locations because one's going to deal you damage while another one's just going to spend time and make you go through your deck faster. So lots of variety, lots of cool choices in here. If you like some mathy puzzles and tactical decisions, this is the best Dragons of Etchinstone has to offer. So overall, if you want a quick playing but sometimes brain-burny adventure game with sort of a roguelike feel where yes, sometimes the luck is going to kill you, but you'll also level up in exciting ways and face varied challenges, I think Dragons of Etchinstone could be for you. But if randomness bothers you a lot, or if you don't like games like, say, Mage Knight, where you're trying to take a hand of cards and sort of cobble together the best possible combo and math out what's going to work best for you, you might want to avoid this one. And if you want to see the game in action, you can see the basic play in my old preview. And speaking of the expansions, let's do something a little bit different and talk through them. So first, talking about Northvale, what does this one give you? Well, first of all, you get 4 new dragons, and you get 2 new regions. And those new regions come with a ton of new abilities, so it really changes up your core adventure gameplay quite a lot. And then you also get asymmetric characters. You replace 4 of the cards in the core deck with the 4 cards for your character. And these are quite different. They really change up the combos and the strategies you're going to use a lot. So I think this expansion is awesome. Definitely one I strongly recommend. I think having new characters is quite exciting, and you get a ton of new play with very different monsters and different abilities to counter. So full recommend for Northvale. I think if you already enjoy the base game, this adds a ton of variety and replay to the experience. Then the other expansion is Siege, which adds a different mode to the game. In this one, you're trying to defend one of these fortifications, which has its life value going up and down, and you can even level these up and change what kind of thing you're defending, which can give you big bonuses. And you're still going through your deck, but everything is combat now. There are no adventures. But it's actually more complicated than that because you draw 5 cards a turn instead of 4, and you're creating 2 little combos of cards, one to defend against their attack on your fortification, that uses movement, and the other one to actually battle the enemy with combat. And I'll give the Siege mode credit, this is actually even more puzzly than the base game, because with these 5 cards, you have to keep 1 as the reserve, but you could put 3 of them towards combat, or 3 of them towards movement, or do 2 and 2, and they're acting as either an element or as a boost. So the combos and the tactical choices of how you play out your hand are even more complicated and potentially yummy than in the base game. But on the negative side, this first of all makes the whole palm thing basically impossible. I had to play Siege on a table because you're trying to create 2 sets of cards and a reserve. Remember which one is which. Doesn't really work when you just have them in your hand. Similarly, trying to keep the health of the fortification there with like everything else gets a little awkward because you're supposed to have like stuff that you're looking at in the front here, but also not letting this move. And another thing to be aware of, at least this is how it's been in my plays of Siege mode, which to be fair is a lot less than the base game. I've found this one way tougher. I haven't even gotten to the dragon except when I've played on lower difficulty settings, because very quickly as you get to the later regions, you need to have a ton of movement and a ton of combat in every hand, and that's just not how the cards often come out. So this expansion compared to Northvale is much less of a recommendation. I think this is only for experts in the game who have already played it a whole bunch, although to be fair, it does change up the gameplay quite a lot, so it maybe gives more value if you enjoy it. But for me personally, Siege is the less enjoyable way to play Dragons of Etchinstone, and I like the base game a lot more. So there you go, everybody, a 5 and 5 review with a bonus. I hope you enjoyed that and hope it was helpful. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our biggest Patreon supporters, J. William F., Steve Wren, Pedro Lucas, Miles, KCW, Andrew R., and Chris C. We'll see you at the next stop. And if you want to see the game in action, my preview play is still basically identical to the final game except for a few small balance changes, so you can go watch that and see it in action.